The milk pail hit the barn floor at 4:47 a.m., and 68-year-old Paulina couldn't get up. She lay there on the cold concrete, her body locked in a pain so sharp it stole her breath. Above her, 12 dairy cows shifted in their stalls, waiting for the morning routine that had never been late in 35 years. But this morning, Paulina's hands wouldn't stop shaking. This morning, the pain that had been her constant companion for 8 months finally won. 300 yards away, in the farmhouse that had belonged to her grandparents, 6 children slept in beds that Paulina had tucked them into just 6 hours earlier. 6 grandchildren who depended on her for everything. 6 reasons she had pushed through the pain every single day since the surgery that was supposed to help her. The surgery that destroyed her instead. And when 13-year-old Emma found her grandmother sprawled on that barn floor, she made a decision that would expose a cover-up reaching into the highest levels of Memorial Medical Center. A decision that would bring Hell's Angels face to face with a hospital administration that thought they'd buried the truth forever. Because some people think evidence can just disappear. But they forget that some communities don't let their own suffer in silence. And they definitely forget that some debts are repaid across decades, no matter what it costs. This is the story of what happens when a hospital destroys the wrong person's medical records. When they cover up the wrong surgeon's mistakes. When they think an elderly dairy farmer with 6 grandkids is too poor, too powerless, too invisible to matter. They didn't count on the men in leather jackets who remembered what she did 35 years ago, when every doctor said there was no hope left. Paulina's day had started the way it had started every single day for the past 3 decades, in darkness, with calloused hands reaching for work boots that knew every inch of the dairy barn by memory. For a.m. The alarm hadn't even needed to ring for the last 20 years. Her body just knew. She moved through the farmhouse kitchen in silence, past the photographs on the refrigerator that she couldn't look at for too long. Her daughter and son-in-law, frozen in time 4 years ago, before the semi-truck ran the red light on Highway 14. Before Paulina went from grandmother to guardian. Before 6 children became her entire world. The coffee maker gurgled. She poured a cup, added the cream from yesterday's batch, her own dairy, from her own cows, from the land that had been in her family for 4 generations. The land she was losing acre by acre, because the medical bills wouldn't stop coming and her body wouldn't stop failing. The pain hit her before she even reached the barn door. It always started the same way. A sharp spike just below her ribs on the right side, like someone driving a hot poker through her abdomen. The doctors at Memorial Medical Center had told her it was normal post-surgical discomfort. Give it time, they'd said. These things heal slowly at your age. That was 8 months ago. The pain hadn't decreased. It had multiplied. Paulina gripped the door frame, breathing through clenched teeth. She'd learned to manage it. Mind over matter. Compartmentalize. Focus on what needed doing. Emma would be up in 2 hours to get her younger siblings ready for school. Emma, who already had the weight of the world on her 13-year-old shoulders. Emma, who watched Paulina with eyes that were too knowing, too worried, too aware that something was very wrong. "I'm fine," Paulina whispered to the empty kitchen, like saying it aloud would make it true. She pushed through the door into the pre-dawn cold. The barn smelled like it always did, hay and grain and the warm, earthy scent of the dairy cows who knew her footsteps. 12 Holsteins, down from the 40 her father had kept. 12 cows that still produced enough milk to keep the lights on, food on the table, and a weekly delivery to a clubhouse on the edge of town where men in leather jackets paid cash and always said thank you. The Hell's Angels had been her customers for 35 years. Longer than most marriages. Longer than some lifetimes. Paulina grabbed the milking stool and bucket, positioning herself beside Daisy, the oldest cow, the one who'd been born the same year Emma had. Her hands found the familiar rhythm. Pull, squeeze, release. Pull, squeeze, release. The sound of milk hitting the metal pail had been the soundtrack of her entire adult life. Then the pain struck again. Harder this time. Paulina gasped, her hands freezing mid-motion. The world tilted. Sweat broke out across her forehead despite the November chill. She tried to breathe through it, tried to wait for it to pass like all the other times, but this time something was different. This time, her vision started to blur. She felt herself sliding off the stool, felt her shoulder hit the barn floor, heard the milk pail crash beside her and the sound of fresh milk spreading across concrete. Daisy shifted nervously in her stall, and somewhere in the distance, Paulina heard the other cows responding to the disruption. She tried to get up. Her body wouldn't respond. The pain was everywhere now. Not just the sharp spike, but a deep, radiating agony that felt like her entire abdomen was tearing apart from the inside. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. She pressed her palm against the concrete, trying to push herself up, but her arm had no strength. "Not now," she whispered. "Please. Not now. The kids need." The barn door creaked open. "Grandma?" Emma's voice. Young and scared and far too familiar with loss. "Grandma!" Footsteps running. Small hands on her shoulder, rolling her onto her back. Emma's face appeared above her, eyes wide with the kind of terror that no 13-year-old should have to feel twice in one lifetime. "I'm okay," Paulina managed. "Just give me a minute." "You're not okay." Emma's voice cracked. "You're crying. You never cry. Help me up. I just need." "No." Emma's jaw set in a way that reminded Paulina painfully of her daughter. "I'm calling 911. We can't afford." "I don't care." "Emma, listen to me." Paulina grabbed her granddaughter's wrist with what little strength she had left. "No ambulance. No hospital. That place already took everything. They took my health, they took our savings, they took—" Her voice broke. "They took any chance I had of keeping this farm for you kids." Emma stared at her, and in that moment, Paulina saw the girl become something harder. Something that understood that the world doesn't always play fair. That sometimes the people who are supposed to help you are the ones who hurt you most. "What do you mean they took everything?" Emma asked quietly. Paulina closed her eyes. She tried so hard to shield the kids from this. From the truth about the surgery that was supposed to be routine. From the complications the doctors swore weren't their fault. From the medical records that mysteriously vanished when her court-appointed lawyer tried to get them. From the phone calls she'd overheard late at night, hospital administrators using words like liability and containment, and she has no case. "The surgery," Paulina whispered. 8 months ago. Something went wrong. They won't admit it, but something went very wrong, and now." She gestured vaguely at her body, at the pain that had become her constant companion. "Now I'm breaking down piece by piece, and they say there's nothing in my records that shows they made any mistakes." "But you requested your records. I remember you on the phone asking for them." "They said the files were lost. System migration error." Paulina's laugh was bitter. "Convenient, isn't it? The one surgery that went wrong, and those specific records just disappear." Emma's face had gone very still. "That's not an accident." "No, it's not." "What did your lawyer say?" "That without the surgical notes, without the documentation of what actually happened in that operating room, we have nothing. It's my word against a surgeon's. And in case you haven't noticed, sweetheart, I'm not exactly a powerful person." Emma sat back on her heels, her young face wrestling with something too big, too unjust. Then her expression changed. Hardened. "Grandma," she said slowly, "you always told us that the bikers, the ones you deliver milk to, you always said they were good people. That they look out for their own." Paulina's heart clenched. "Emma, you can't. You told me about the time you helped one of them. Years ago, before I was born. You said he was dying and you gave him some kind of medicine the hospital didn't have, and he lived. That was different. That was... You said they never forgot. You said that's why they still buy milk from us when they could get it cheaper at any store. You said loyalty means something to them." Paulina tried to sit up, failed, slumped back against the concrete. "I won't have you going to them asking for help. I won't." "You'd rather die?" Emma's voice cracked again, and now the tears came, streaming down her young face. "You'd rather let this farm go under and have us end up in foster care because you're too proud to ask for help from people who actually care about you?" The words hit Paulina like a physical blow. Foster care. The nightmare that woke her up at 3 a.m., that had her checking and rechecking the farm's finances, that made her push through pain that would have hospitalized most people. "They're not our family," Paulina said weakly. "Neither was Dad, technically. Emma's voice was fierce now. He married into our family. But he loved Mom, and he loved us, and he was the best father I ever could have asked for. Family isn't just blood, Grandma. You taught me that. Paulina closed her eyes, feeling the truth of it settle over her. Family isn't just blood. She'd been delivering milk to the Hells Angels clubhouse for 35 years. She'd watched some of them grow old, watched new members join, watched them bury their dead with the kind of loyalty most blood relatives never managed. She'd gone to their fundraisers for kids' charities, had seen them pull over to help stranded motorists, had heard the stories that never made the news about the good they did quietly, without cameras or recognition. And yes, she'd saved Jake's life 35 years ago, when he was 23 and bleeding out after a highway accident and the doctors had given up. She'd brought the native herbs her grandmother had taught her about, the old remedies that modern medicine dismissed. She'd administered them against hospital policy, and Jake had survived. He'd lived another 32 years before cancer took him last winter. She'd gone to his funeral. Half the town had. "Promise me you won't go there alone," Paulina finally said. Emma wiped her eyes. "I promise nothing. You need help and I'm going to get it." Before Paulina could protest further, Emma was up and running back toward the house. Moments later, she heard the sound of her other grandchildren waking up, heard Emma's voice, older than it should be, commanding, telling them to get ready for school, that Grandma wasn't feeling well, that everything was going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay. Paulina hoped it was true. She hoped Emma wouldn't do anything foolish. She hoped the pain would ease enough for her to get up, to finish the milking, to keep the fragile routine that was all that stood between her grandchildren and disaster. But lying there on the barn floor, in pain that made breathing an act of will, Paulina knew something had fundamentally changed. The secret she'd been keeping, that her body was failing, that the hospital had destroyed her, that time was running out, was now shared. And Emma was her daughter's child through and through, stubborn, fierce, and unwilling to watch someone she loved suffer in silence. 30 feet above her, through the gaps in the barn roof, the November sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. The cows needed milking. 6 children needed breakfast and school lunches and permission slips signed. Life didn't stop for pain. Paulina pressed her palms against the concrete and pushed herself up. It took 3 tries. By the time she was sitting upright, sweat soaked through her work shirt and the world swam in and out of focus. But she was up. She reached for the fallen milk pail, righted it, and positioned herself beside Daisy once more. Pull, squeeze, release. Pull, squeeze, release. The rhythm steadied her. The familiar motion gave her something to focus on beyond the pain. This was her life. This land, these animals, these children. She would hold it together. She had to. But even as her hands found their rhythm, even as the milk began to flow again, Paulina couldn't shake the feeling that something had been set in motion. That Emma's eyes, so fierce, so determined, had seen a path forward that Paulina herself had given up on. She thought about Morris, the Hells Angels president. Big man, quiet voice, eyes that missed nothing. She thought about the way he'd looked at her at Jake's funeral, the way he'd gripped her hand and said, "He never forgot what you did. None of us did." She thought about what it might mean if Emma actually went to them. If she asked for help. If she told them what Memorial Medical Center had done. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the barn in shades of gold and amber. A new day. The same struggle. But maybe, just maybe, with a different ending than the one Paulina had resigned herself to. She finished milking Daisy and moved to the next cow, pushing the thoughts away. Speculation was a luxury. Action was all that mattered. One cow at a time. One moment at a time. One day at a time. That's how you survived. That's how you protected the people who depended on you. Even when your body was breaking down. Even when the institution that was supposed to heal you had instead destroyed evidence of their own negligence. Even when the future looked like nothing but pain and loss and foreclosure. You kept milking the cows. You kept feeding the children. You kept going. Emma didn't go to school that day. She got her 5 younger siblings fed, dressed, and onto the school bus. Caleb, 12, Madison, 10, twins Owen and Olivia, 8, and little Sophie, 4, heading to pre-K. She smiled and waved as the bus pulled away, and the moment it disappeared around the bend in the dirt road, her smile vanished. She had 7 hours before they came home. 7 hours to do something that terrified her and felt absolutely necessary in equal measure. Emma pulled out her phone, the hand-me-down smartphone Grandma had given her for emergencies, and typed Hell's Angels Clubhouse into the search bar. She'd never been there. Grandma had always made the milk deliveries alone, always early in the morning before Emma and her siblings were awake. The address appeared, 4892 County Road J, on the outskirts of town in an area Emma knew by reputation only. The industrial zone. Warehouses and auto shops and places parents told their kids to avoid after dark. She looked at her bicycle leaning against the porch. It would take her maybe 40 minutes to ride there. She'd never biked that far alone before. Never broken her grandmother's rules this dramatically. But she kept seeing Grandma's face, pale and pain-racked on that barn floor. Kept hearing the break in her voice when she said, "They took everything." Emma went back inside the farmhouse. In the kitchen, she poured a glass of milk, Grandma's milk, from Grandma's cows, and drank it slowly, thinking, "You always said they were good people." That's what she told Grandma, and it was true. Paulina had never spoken badly about the bikers. She'd told stories about Jake, the man who'd become something like an uncle to their family even though Emma had been too young to remember him well before he died. She'd talked about Morris, who always asked about the grandkids and had sent flowers when Emma's parents died. She'd mentioned fundraisers the club organized for children's hospitals, toys they collected for Christmas, the way they showed up when community members needed help. But Emma had also heard the whispers at school. Hell's Angels. Motorcycle gang. Dangerous. Criminal. The kind of people you cross the street to avoid. She thought about her parents. About the last conversation she'd had with her dad, the night before the accident. He'd been helping her with math homework, and she'd been frustrated, ready to give up. He'd said, "Emma, you're braver than you think. When something matters, you find the courage. That's what our family does." This mattered. Emma set down the glass, grabbed her jacket, and walked out to her bike. The ride took 43 minutes. Emma's legs burned by the time she turned onto County Road J, and her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The clubhouse wasn't what she expected. She'd imagined something dark and menacing, barbed wire and graffiti and men with weapons standing guard. Instead, she found a large, well-maintained building that looked almost like a community center. The parking lot was half full of motorcycles, gleaming chrome and leather seats, parked in neat rows. An American flag flew from a pole out front. There was even a small garden area with flowers that were holding on despite the November chill. Emma stopped her bike at the edge of the parking lot, suddenly frozen with uncertainty. What was she doing? What was she going to say? "Hi, my grandma's in pain and a hospital destroyed evidence. Can you help?" It sounded insane. They were going to laugh at her. Or worse, they were going to be annoyed that a random kid showed up bothering them about things that weren't their problem. She was about to turn around when the clubhouse door opened. A man stepped out. Big, maybe 6'4", broad-shouldered, with a gray beard and a leather vest that had patches Emma couldn't read from this distance. He was carrying a cup of coffee and had been about to walk to one of the motorcycles when he spotted her. He stopped. They stared at each other across the parking lot. Then the man, moving slowly, deliberately, like he was trying not to spook a nervous animal, walked toward her. Not fast. Not threatening. Just approaching. "You lost, kid?" His voice was deep but not unkind. Emma's mouth went dry. I'm looking for Morris." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Morris? You know Morris?" "Not exactly. But he knows my grandma, Paulina. She delivers milk here." Something shifted in the man's expression. Recognition and then concern. "You're Paulina's granddaughter?" Emma nodded. "The oldest one? Emma?" She blinked. "How do you know my name?" "Your grandma talks about you kids every time she makes a delivery. Shows us pictures." The man's face softened. "I'm Marcus. Morris is inside. Is everything okay? Where's Paulina?" The kindness in his voice undid something in Emma. All the fear and stress and terror of the morning crashed over her at once, And before she could stop herself, she was talking. She's hurt. She's been hurt for months, but she won't tell anyone because she can't afford to go back to the hospital, and she collapsed this morning in the barn and she can barely walk, and she says they destroyed her medical records and she's going to lose the farm and we're going to lose her and I don't know what to do. Emma ran out of breath. Tears were streaming down her face and she couldn't make them stop. Marcus had gone very still. "Wait here," he said quietly. He turned and walked quickly back to the clubhouse, disappearing inside. Emma stood there shaking, hugging herself, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Less than a minute later, the door opened again. 5 men came out. Marcus, plus 4 others. The one in the lead was older than the rest, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a ponytail and a face that looked like it had seen more than its share of hard living. He wore a leather vest with "President" written across the back. Morris. He walked straight to Emma, and despite his size and the intimidating patches on his vest, his eyes were gentle. "Emma," he said, "tell me what happened to Paulina." And so she did. She told him about finding Grandma on the barn floor, about the pain that had been getting worse for 8 months, about the surgery that was supposed to help, about the missing medical records, about the lawyer who said there was no case without documentation, about the medical bills that were drowning them, about how Grandma pushed through every day pretending everything was fine because 6 kids depended on her and she'd rather die than let them end up in foster care. The 5 men listened in complete silence. When Emma finished, Morris looked at the others. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Morris knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level. "Your grandma is one of the toughest people I've ever met," he said quietly. 35 years ago, she saved my brother's life when every doctor in that hospital said he was done for. Jake lived another 3 decades because of her. He got to see his kids grow up. He got to meet his grandkids. He got to live." Emma nodded. She'd heard the story. "Jake passed last winter," Morris continued. "But before he died, he made me promise something. He said if Paulina or her family ever needed anything, anything at all, we make it right. No questions asked." "I didn't come here to make you fulfill some deathbed promise," Emma said, her voice small. I don't know where else to go. The hospital won't help. The lawyer says we have no case. And Grandma's too proud to ask for help from anyone. But she's dying. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but whatever's wrong inside her is killing her piece by piece, and I can't just watch it happen." Morris stood up, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was harder, colder. The voice of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed from it. "Marcus, get the truck. We're going to Paulina's farm. Now." "What are you going to do?" Emma asked. Morris looked down at her, and something in his expression made Emma think of her father. That same quiet determination. That same protective instinct. "We're going to get the truth," Morris said. "And then we're going to make sure the people who hurt her answer for it." Think about this for a moment. A 13-year-old girl just rode her bicycle across town to ask for help from people most of society tells her to fear. She did it because the institutions that are supposed to protect us, hospitals, lawyers, the legal system, had all failed her grandmother. Failed the woman who'd spent 35 years working sunrise to sunset, raising children and grandchildren, contributing to her community, and asking for nothing in return. What would you have done in Emma's position? When the system fails, when the people in power destroy evidence rather than admit mistakes, where do you turn? Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms. Sometimes it comes from communities who take care of their own. And sometimes the people society dismisses as dangerous are the only ones willing to stand up when everyone else looks away.
If this story resonates with you, if you believe some debts are worth repaying across decades, hit that like button, because what happens next is going to show you exactly what loyalty looks like when it's tested.
Paulina was in the kitchen when she heard the motorcycles. She'd made it back from the barn, had showered and changed into clean clothes, was trying to prepare something that might pass for dinner later. Moving slowly, carefully, every motion calculated to avoid triggering the pain that waited like a predator in her abdomen. Then she heard them. The distinctive rumble of multiple bikes approaching. Her heart sank. She knew that sound. She'd been hearing it for 35 years, but never here. Never at the farm. The delivery arrangement had always been simple. She brought milk to the clubhouse. They paid cash. Everyone went their separate ways. Professional. No overlap between her world and theirs. Paulina moved to the window and watched 3 motorcycles and 1 pickup truck pull into her driveway. Morris climbed off the lead bike. Marcus and 3 others she recognized from deliveries got off the other motorcycles. And from the truck's passenger seat emerged Emma, looking simultaneously defiant and terrified. "Oh, sweetheart," Paulina whispered. "What did you do?" She met them at the door before they could knock. Morris stood on her porch, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. He'd aged since Jake's funeral. They both had. Time and loss had carved lines in both their faces. "Paulina," Morris said quietly, "you didn't need to come here. Emma seems to think differently." Paulina looked past him to where her granddaughter stood by the truck, chin raised, eyes fierce. "Emma shouldn't have bothered you with our problems." "Is it true?" Morris asked. "The surgery, the missing records, all of it? It's not your concern." "That's not what I asked." Paulina's hands tightened on the doorframe. The pain was building again, that familiar spike that meant she'd been upright too long, moving too much. She needed to sit down. She needed these people to leave so she could fall apart in private. "I don't need charity," she said, her voice harder than she felt. Morris's expression didn't change. "Jake's dying words were about you. Did Emma tell you that?" Paulina went very still. "He was in hospice, barely coherent, and he used what little strength he had left to make me swear on my brother's grave that if you ever needed help, we'd be there. No hesitation. No questions. Just be there." Morris paused. "So I'm not here offering charity, Paulina. I'm here fulfilling a promise to my brother. And I'm here because for 35 years, you've treated us like human beings when half this town crossed the street to avoid us. You've shown up every week with milk and a smile and questions about our families like we mattered." "You do matter," Paulina said quietly. "Then let us matter to you too. Let us help." Behind Morris, Emma was crying silently. Paulina saw Marcus put a hand on the girl's shoulder, steadying her. The fight went out of Paulina all at once. She was so tired. Tired of pretending she was fine. Tired of carrying this alone. Tired of pain and fear and watching her grandchildren learn to navigate loss that no child should have to understand. "Come in," she said. They sat in her living room, 5 leather-clad bikers looking out of place among the floral furniture and family photographs, and 1 13-year-old girl who'd set all of this in motion. Paulina told them everything. The gallbladder surgery 8 months ago that should have been routine. 72 hours in the hospital, discharged with pain medication and assurances that recovery would take a few weeks. But the weeks passed and the pain didn't decrease, it intensified. She went back to the hospital. Saw a different doctor. Ran tests that showed some inflammation, probably normal post-surgical response. More pain medication. More reassurances. 3 months post-surgery, she could barely work the farm. 6 months post-surgery, she was spending half her day in bed. 7 months post-surgery, she finally scraped together enough money for a consultation with a different surgeon at a different hospital. That surgeon took one look at her scans and went pale. "There's extensive internal damage," he told her. "Scarring and adhesions consistent with surgical error. Something went very wrong during your original procedure." He'd recommended corrective surgery. Extensive. Expensive. And he'd suggested she contact a lawyer because this level of damage doesn't happen in a properly performed gallbladder removal. So Paulina had gotten a lawyer. Court-appointed, overworked, but earnest. He'd requested her surgical records from Memorial Medical Center. The hospital's response came 3 weeks later. "Records lost during recent system migration. We apologize for the inconvenience." The lawyer tried again. Formal legal demand. The response came faster this time, from the hospital's legal department. Despite extensive search, surgical records for the date in question cannot be located. Hospital is not liable for data lost during system upgrades. Her lawyer was furious. "They're stonewalling. This isn't an accident. Someone destroyed those records. But without documentation of what happened in that operating room, there was no case. It was her word against Memorial Medical Center's word. A struggling dairy farmer versus an institution with a legal team and unlimited resources. The medical bills kept coming. The farm was drowning in debt. And Paulina's body was failing more each day. Why didn't you tell me? Emma's voice was small. Why didn't you tell any of us? Because you're 13, Paulina said gently. You've already lost your parents. I won't let you lose your home too. I won't let you see me as broken. You're not broken, Emma said fiercely. They broke you. There's a difference. Morris had been listening in silence, his expression growing darker with each detail. Now he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his full attention on Paulina. This surgeon who made the mistake, he said. You know his name? Dr. Sebastian Barnes. And the hospital's legal team, they told you directly that the records were gone? Yes. Did they offer any settlement? Any kind of compensation? Paulina laughed bitterly. They offered me a coupon for 10% off my next elective procedure. I'm not kidding. That's what they sent. A coupon and a form letter about how they value patient feedback. One of the other bikers, a younger man named Tommy, actually swore. Morris shot him a look and Tommy fell silent, but the fury in his expression remained. Here's what I think happened, Morris said slowly. Dr. Barnes made a mistake during your surgery. Maybe he nicked something he shouldn't have. Maybe he didn't catch a complication. Maybe he was rushed or careless or having a bad day. Whatever it was, he knew it. And instead of reporting it and facing consequences, he buried it. But other people must have been in that operating room, Marcus said. Nurses, anesthesiologists, surgical assistants. They would have seen. Which means either they didn't realize what happened in the moment, Morris continued, or they were pressured to stay quiet. And when Paulina started asking questions, when her new surgeon raised red flags, the hospital's legal team made a decision: destroy the evidence and deny everything. You can't prove that, Paulina said, but her voice lacked conviction. Not yet. Morris looked at his brothers. Some unspoken communication passed between them. But we can try. How? Emma asked. Morris turned to her. By doing what we're good at. Asking questions people don't want to answer. Finding things people tried to hide. He looked back at Paulina. With your permission. Paulina wanted to say no. Wanted to protect these men from the mess that was her life. But Emma was watching her with those fierce, hopeful eyes. And 6 children slept in beds upstairs who deserved better than watching their grandmothers slowly die from a preventable injury. What would you need from me? Paulina asked quietly. Names. Dates. Every detail you remember about that surgery and everything after. Every person you talked to at the hospital. Every document they sent you, even the insulting coupon. Morris pulled out his phone. We start by mapping out exactly what happened. Then we find the cracks in their story. Because somebody knows the truth, Paulina. Somebody in that hospital saw what Barnes did. And people who carry secrets like that, eventually, they break. It was Marcus who asked the question they'd all been dancing around. Why though? Why does Morris's brother's deathbed wish matter so much that we're all here? He looked at Paulina. I mean, you delivered milk. That's business. What made you family? Paulina glanced at Morris. He nodded. It was 1990, Paulina began. I was 33 years old. My husband had just died, heart attack, sudden. He was only 38. I was running the farm alone with a 9-year-old daughter, drowning in grief and debt and fear. The Hells Angels had just started buying milk from me. It was Jake's idea. He'd stopped by one day asking if we sold fresh dairy, and when I said yes, he became a regular customer. Then he brought his brothers. It kept the farm afloat that first terrible year. She paused, remembering. Then one night in August, there was an accident on Highway 14. Semi-truck jackknifed it. Motorcycle couldn't stop in time. The rider, Jake, Morris said quietly. They brought him to Memorial Medical Center. Same hospital, actually. Same emergency room where I just told you my records disappeared. Paulina's smile was sad. Funny how things come full circle. She stood up slowly, walked to a shelf, and pulled down an old photograph in a simple frame. She handed it to Emma. The photo showed a young man in a hospital bed, bruised and bandaged, giving a weak thumbs up to the camera. Beside him stood a younger Paulina, holding a small cloth bag. Jake was 23. Internal bleeding, collapsed lung, broken pelvis. The doctors stabilized him, but his condition kept deteriorating. Some kind of infection they couldn't control. By the third day, they told Morris. She looked at the club president. "What did they tell you?" "That he had maybe 6 hours," Morris said, his voice rough with old pain. "That they'd done everything they could. That we should say goodbye." "I was at the hospital visiting another farmer who'd been injured," Paulina continued. "I overheard Morris and some of the other brothers talking in the waiting room. Heard them trying to figure out how to tell Jake's mother that her son was dying. And I thought about my husband, about how I'd give anything for just one more chance to save him. So I went home." "You went home?" Emma looked confused. "To get my grandmother's medicine bag. She was Ojibwe, came from the reservation up north. She taught me about healing herbs, traditional remedies that predated hospitals and prescription drugs. I had no idea if any of it would help Jake, but the doctors had already given up. What did we have to lose?" Paulina took the photograph back, looking at it. "I mixed up a poultice for his wounds, golden seal and honey and something else I won't name because the doctors would have had me arrested. And I made him drink a tea that tasted terrible but had compounds in it that we now know have powerful antimicrobial properties. The nurses weren't happy about it. Said I was interfering with medical care. But Morris gave them a look that made them decide to take an extended break." "You were breaking hospital rules," Marcus said. "I was absolutely breaking hospital rules. I could have been banned from the premises. Could have faced legal action if anything went wrong." Paulina shrugged. "But Jake was dying anyway. What were they going to do, make him more dead?" "By the next morning, his fever had broken," Morris said. "By the end of the week, he was sitting up. By the end of the month, he was home. The doctors called it a miracle. We knew better." "He lived 32 more years," Paulina said softly. "Got married. Had 3 kids. I was at the hospital when all 3 were born, and he'd always joke that I was his good luck charm. When he passed last winter," her voice caught. "Morris told me that Jake spent his last day talking about that night in the hospital. About how everyone had given up except one stubborn dairy farmer who thought plants could do what modern medicine couldn't." Emma was crying again. "That's why you've been delivering milk for 35 years. That's why we pay double what grocery stores charge," Morris corrected. "Jake insisted. Said Paulina's milk kept him alive in more ways than one." "I never asked for extra," Paulina protested. "We know. That's part of why we did it." Morris looked around at his brothers. "Jake made us promise. On his literal deathbed, barely able to speak, he made us swear that if Paulina ever needed anything, anything at all, we'd move heaven and earth to help her. Not because of the milk. Not because of business. But because some debts are bigger than money. Some bonds are stronger than blood." The room fell silent. Outside, the November afternoon was fading toward evening. Soon Emma would need to get dinner started for her siblings. Soon Paulina would need to take more pain medication and pretend everything was fine. Soon life would resume its relentless forward motion. But in this moment, in this room, something had shifted. "So what do we do now?" Tommy asked. Morris stood up. "Now we find out who in that hospital knows what really happened to Paulina. We find out who helped Dr. Barnes cover it up. And we find out where those missing records actually are." "How?" Paulina asked. "By remembering what we're good at." Morris smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "We're very good at finding things people don't want found. And we're very good at making people uncomfortable enough to tell the truth." "I can't ask you to break the law," Paulina said. "You're not asking. We're offering. And we won't break anything that matters." Morris headed toward the door, his brothers following. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, keep a log of every symptom, every pain, every way this injury affects your daily life. We're building a case, and we need documentation." At the door, he turned back. Oh, and Paulina? If anyone from the hospital contacts you, lawyers, administrators, anyone, you don't talk to them without us present. Understood? Morris, I can't. You saved Jake's life with herbs and stubbornness when every expert said it was hopeless. Now let us save yours. He looked at Emma. Your grandma's not as alone as she thinks. She's never been alone. She just forgot that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when it matters most. They left, motorcycles rumbling to life in the driveway, and Paulina and Emma stood on the porch watching them go. Are we in trouble? Emma asked quietly. Paulina put her arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. I don't know, sweetheart, but I think maybe, just maybe, we're not as powerless as I thought. That night, after the younger children were in bed, Emma found Paulina sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. Medical bills. Hospital correspondence. The insulting coupon. What are you doing? Emma asked. Making a timeline. Paulina gestured at the spread of documents. Morris was right. If we're going to prove what happened, we need to organize everything. Every interaction with the hospital, every promise they made and broke, every time they blocked our attempts to get records. Emma sat down across from her. Can I help? Paulina looked at her granddaughter, 13 years old, too young to be dealing with medical malpractice and institutional corruption, but already learning that sometimes the world requires you to grow up faster than you should. Yeah, Paulina said. You can help. They worked until past midnight, building a chronology of negligence and cover-up. And in a clubhouse across town, 5 men were making calls, asking questions, and beginning an investigation that would eventually shake Memorial Medical Center to its foundation. Some debts are repaid in money. Some are repaid in loyalty. And some, the ones that matter most, are repaid in justice. Rebecca Morrison had been a nurse at Memorial Medical Center for 17 years, and she'd learned a long time ago that hospitals run on paperwork and silence. She was 42 years old, divorced, mother of 2 teenagers she was raising alone. She worked double shifts when the hospital was short-staffed. She'd been Employee of the Month 4 times. She'd held patients' hands as they died, celebrated with families when babies were born, and witnessed more miracles and tragedies than most people saw in a lifetime. She'd also witnessed things that weren't supposed to be seen. 3 years ago, she'd reported a doctor for showing up to surgery drunk. She'd followed protocol, filed the complaint with her supervisor, and waited for action. The doctor got a week of administrative leave. Rebecca got reassigned to the night shift and a note in her personnel file about disruptive workplace behavior. She'd learned her lesson. The hospital protected its own, and she wasn't one of its own. She was replaceable. So when she'd been in the operating room 8 months ago, assisting Dr. Sebastian Barnes with what should have been a routine gallbladder removal, and she'd seen the moment everything went wrong, the moment his scalpel slipped and nicked the patient's intestine, the moment he'd gone pale and looked at the anesthesiologist with panic in his eyes, Rebecca had documented it in her surgical notes and said nothing aloud. She'd written exactly what she saw. Accidental perforation of small intestine at 10:47 a.m. Dr. Barnes immediately addressed the complication, performed repair of intestinal wall, irrigated surgical site. Surgery extended by 47 minutes. It was clinical, factual. The kind of note that would protect the patient if complications arose later, the kind that would ensure proper follow-up care. 2 days later, her supervisor called her into an office. We need to talk about your surgical notes from the Patterson procedure, the supervisor had said. Patterson? Rebecca didn't recognize the name. Paulina Patterson. Gallbladder removal, Dr. Barnes. Oh, the intestinal perforation case. Her supervisor's expression had been carefully neutral. Dr. Barnes reviewed your notes and believes you may have misunderstood what you saw. The perforation you documented never occurred. Rebecca had stared at her. I was standing right there. I saw it happen. Sometimes in the heat of surgery, things can appear different than they are. Dr. Barnes is requesting that you amend your notes to reflect that the procedure was completed without complication. That would be lying. That would be correcting an error in documentation. Rebecca had felt the ground shifting beneath her. She thought about her kids, about the mortgage she could barely afford, about the fact that nursing jobs weren't exactly abundant in this town. "What happens if I don't amend the notes?" she'd asked. Her supervisor had smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "I'd hate to see another complaint about disruptive behavior in your file. 2 incidents might suggest a pattern." So Rebecca had amended her notes. She'd deleted the line about the intestinal perforation. She'd written instead, "Routine gallbladder removal completed without complication." And then she'd gone home and vomited into her toilet for an hour. That should have been the end of it. One more compromise, one more piece of her integrity sacrificed on the altar of job security. She told herself the patient had probably recovered fine. Most people did, even from surgical complications. But 3 months later, she'd been working the intake desk when an elderly woman came in for a follow-up appointment. The woman had been moving slowly, clearly in pain, and when Rebecca checked her in, she saw the name, Paulina Patterson. Rebecca had watched from across the waiting room as Paulina was taken back for evaluation. She'd pulled up the chart when her shift ended and saw the notes from the examining physician. Patient reports chronic abdominal pain since gallbladder surgery. Scans show extensive adhesions and internal scarring consistent with post-surgical complications. The doctor had referred Paulina to a specialist and noted, "Patient may benefit from corrective surgery. Recommend obtaining original surgical records to determine cause of complications." Rebecca had felt sick all over again. She tried to convince herself it wasn't her responsibility. She'd documented what she saw. The fact that she'd been forced to delete that documentation wasn't her fault. She had kids to feed, a mortgage to pay. She couldn't risk her job. But then, 2 weeks ago, something happened that she couldn't ignore. She'd been walking past conference room B on her way to the cafeteria when she heard voices inside. The door was slightly ajar. She would have kept walking, but she heard Dr. Barnes's name and stopped. "The Patterson situation is contained." That was Gerald Whitmore, the hospital's chief legal counsel. She recognized his voice. "Are you sure?" Dr. Barnes, sounding nervous. "The surgical notes have been amended. The backup files were purged during the system migration. If she pursues legal action, it's her word against yours, and she has no documentation." Whitmore sounded supremely confident. "What about the nurses? Someone might have made a copy." "We verified that all personnel followed protocol. The notes were amended per policy. If anyone had kept unauthorized copies, they'd be in violation of hospital confidentiality agreements and subject to immediate termination." A third voice, one Rebecca didn't recognize. What if she finds another lawyer? Someone with more resources than the public defender she has now. She's a dairy farmer raising 6 grandkids on Social Security. Whitmore's tone dripped with contempt. She can barely afford her current medical bills. She's not going to somehow come up with money for a high-powered attorney. This case dies quietly, Dr. Barnes keeps his license, and the hospital avoids a costly settlement. Everyone wins. "Except Patterson," the third voice said. "Except Patterson," Whitmore agreed. "But that's not our problem." Rebecca had stood outside that conference room, her hands shaking, rage building in her chest like a fire. They'd destroyed evidence. They'd deliberately purged backup files. They were betting on Paulina being too poor, too powerless to fight back. And they were probably right. But Rebecca had a copy of her original surgical notes. She'd saved them in her personal email before amending them, not because she planned to use them, but because some part of her needed to hold onto the truth. She'd kept them hidden for 8 months, a guilty secret that ate at her every time she saw Paulina's name pop up in the system for another pain management appointment, another unsuccessful treatment, another note about her deteriorating condition. That night, Rebecca went home and opened her email. She found the message to herself, "Backup, Patterson surgery notes." She read through them again, seeing her own precise documentation of the moment Dr. Barnes's hand slipped, the moment he perforated Paulina Patterson's intestine, the moment everything that followed became inevitable. She thought about her kids. She thought about her mortgage. She thought about the fact that blowing the whistle on the hospital would probably cost her everything. Then she thought about Paulina Patterson, 68 years old, in constant pain, losing her farm, raising 6 grandchildren alone because a surgeon made a mistake and an institution decided covering it up was easier than admitting fault. Rebecca pulled out her phone and did something she never thought she'd do. She Googled Hell's Angels Clubhouse and found an address. It took her 3 days to work up the courage. She drove past the clubhouse twice before finally pulling into the parking lot on the 3rd attempt. It was early evening. There were a dozen motorcycles parked outside, and she could see men moving around inside through the windows. Rebecca sat in her car for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, asking herself what the hell she was doing. Then she remembered Whitmore's voice. "That's not our problem." She got out of the car. The clubhouse door was heavy wood, and she knocked before she could talk herself out of it. The door opened almost immediately. A large man with a gray beard looked down at her, surprised. "Help you?" he asked. "I need to speak to someone about Paulina Patterson," Rebecca said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. The man's expression changed instantly. "Who are you?" "My name is Rebecca Morrison. I'm a nurse at Memorial Medical Center. I was in the operating room during Paulina's surgery. And I have documentation of what really happened, documentation the hospital thinks they destroyed." The man studied her for a long moment, then stepped back. "You better come inside." Rebecca followed him into the clubhouse. It looked nothing like what she'd expected. No drugs, no weapons, just a comfortable common area with couches and a pool table and photographs of motorcycles and families on the walls. 5 men were in the room. They all turned to look at her. The one in the center, older, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing, stood up. "I'm Morris," he said. "You have information about Paulina?" Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. "I have my original surgical notes. Before I was forced to amend them. They show exactly what Dr. Barnes did wrong and exactly how the hospital covered it up." Morris took the USB drive carefully, like it was something precious. "Why bring this to us?" "Because I overheard the legal team 2 weeks ago. They destroyed all the official backup files. They're counting on Paulina being too poor to fight back. And they're right, she can't fight a hospital's legal team." Rebecca's hands were shaking now. "But maybe you can." "Why risk this?" another biker asked. "You're putting your job on the line." "I already put my integrity on the line when I amended those notes the first time." Rebecca's voice cracked. "I told myself I had to protect my kids, that I couldn't afford to lose my job. But 3 years ago, I reported a drunk surgeon and the hospital punished me instead of him. This time, I watched them destroy evidence to protect a doctor who permanently injured a patient. If I stay silent now, what does that make me?" "It makes you someone trying to survive," Morris said quietly. "It makes me complicit." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "Paulina Patterson is in pain every single day because Dr. Barnes made a mistake and I was too scared to fight when they made me erase my documentation of it. I can't give her back her health. But I can give her the truth. And maybe that's enough to get her some kind of justice." Morris looked at the USB drive, then back at Rebecca. "If you testify to what you saw, you'll lose your job. Probably lose your nursing license. The hospital will come after you with everything they have." "I know. Your kids. My kids need to see that sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything, and you do it anyway." Rebecca straightened her shoulders. "I'm tired of institutions protecting themselves instead of patients. I'm tired of being afraid. And I'm tired of watching good people suffer because people like me stay silent." The men in the room exchanged glances. Then Marcus, the big man who'd let her in, smiled. "You've got spine, lady. I'll give you that." "We've been investigating," Morris said. "Asking questions, looking for cracks. But we didn't have proof. Just suspicions and Paulina's testimony. This," he held up the USB drive. "This changes everything." "What will you do with it?" Rebecca asked. "We're going to make sure the right people see it. State Medical Board. Media. Anyone who can force the hospital to answer for what they did." Morris studied her. "But we need more than just surgical notes. We need the full picture. You said you overheard the legal team. Can you document that conversation? Names, dates, what was said?" Rebecca nodded. "I wrote it all down the same day. I have a timeline of everything I witnessed, everyone who was involved in the cover-up. Bring us everything. And then, Morris paused. You should probably prepare for what's coming. The hospital will know where this information came from. They'll try to discredit you, destroy your reputation, maybe even press criminal charges for violating confidentiality agreements. Let them try. Rebecca's jaw set. I spent 3 years staying quiet after they retaliated against me for reporting that drunk surgeon. I watched him operate on 3 more patients before he finally retired. I've carried that guilt every day. I won't carry this one too. Stop and think about Rebecca's choice for a moment. She's a single mother. She has 2 teenagers depending on her. She's already been retaliated against once for reporting misconduct. She knows that blowing the whistle on this cover-up will probably cost her everything, her job, her career, maybe her ability to support her children. But she also knows that staying silent means being complicit in injustice. It means watching Paulina Patterson suffer unnecessarily. It means letting an institution prioritize its reputation over a patient's life. How many of us have seen something wrong and stayed quiet because speaking up felt too risky? How many times have we told ourselves that our responsibility is to our own survival first, to justice second? Rebecca is about to lose everything for doing the right thing. And Hell's Angels, a group most people cross the street to avoid, are the only ones willing to stand with her.
If you believe whistleblowers deserve protection, if you believe healthcare workers shouldn't have to choose between their conscience and their careers, hit that subscribe button because what happens next is going to show you exactly how much courage it takes to stand up to institutional power. And share this story. Share it because somewhere out there, someone else is facing the same choice Rebecca faced. Stay silent and keep their job, or speak up and risk everything. Maybe they need to know they are not alone.
Morris sat in the clubhouse at 2 a.m., laptop open, Rebecca's USB drive contents spread across 3 monitors. He'd been reading surgical notes for 4 hours, cross-referencing them with the timeline Paulina had created, matching them against the hospital's official communications. Marcus was on his right, Tommy on his left, all 3 of them fueled by coffee and a cold rage that had settled into their bones. "This is worse than we thought," Marcus said quietly. Morris nodded. The original surgical notes were damning. Rebecca had documented everything with clinical precision. 10:47 m. Dr. Barnes's scalpel slipped during organ removal, causing 2 centimeters perforation of small intestine. Dr. Barnes immediately recognized error, expressed concern. 10:48 m. Dr. Barnes consulted with anesthesiologist Dr. Karen Chin regarding next steps. Decision made to repair perforation immediately. 10:49 to 11:34 a.m. Dr. Barnes performed repair of intestinal wall using running suture technique. Surgical site irrigated with saline solution. Visual inspection suggested successful repair. 11:35 a.m. Surgery concluded. Total time, 2 hours 47 minutes over projected time. Patient's vital signs stable. Dr. Barnes instructed post-op team to monitor for signs of infection or peritonitis. The notes were professional, factual, exactly what you'd want in a medical record if complications arose later. They documented the error, the immediate response, and the specific steps taken to address it. But the amended notes, the ones the hospital had kept, told a different story. Routine gallbladder removal completed without complication. Total surgical time, 2 hours 47 minutes. Patient's vital signs stable throughout procedure. No mention of the perforation. No mention of the repair. No mention of anything that might suggest Dr. Barnes had made a mistake. They didn't just hide the error, Tommy said. They erased it completely. Morris pulled up another document, an email Rebecca had included in her files. It was from the hospital's legal department to Dr. Barnes, sent 3 months after Paulina's surgery. Per our conversation, All documentation regarding the Patterson procedure has been reviewed and amended per hospital protocol. Backup files purged during scheduled system migration. In the event of legal inquiry, maintain that procedure was completed without incident. Hospital legal team will support this position. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, Marcus said. That's not just destroying evidence, that's coordinating a cover-up. Morris kept reading. Rebecca had been thorough. She'd documented the meeting she'd overheard, complete with names and quotes. She'd included copies of Paulina's medical records from her follow-up appointments, showing the deteriorating condition and the specialist's notes about scarring consistent with surgical complications. She'd even found other nurses who'd been in the OR that day and documented their stories, how they'd all been told to amend their notes, how they'd all been threatened with termination if they spoke about what happened. How many people were involved in this? Tommy asked. Morris counted. Dr. Barnes, obviously. Dr. Chin, the anesthesiologist. 2 surgical nurses besides Rebecca. The head of surgery who ordered the notes amended. The legal team who coordinated the destruction of backup files. Hospital administration who approved it. He looked up. At least 8 people actively participated in covering this up. More if you count the people who knew and stayed silent. 8 people decided that protecting one surgeon's reputation was more important than a patient's health, Marcus said. 8 people agreed to destroy evidence and lie about it. Morris thought about Paulina, about the pain she'd endured for 8 months because the truth had been buried. About 6 grandchildren watching their grandmother suffer. About a farm being lost because medical bills kept piling up for complications that shouldn't have existed. We need to be smart about this, he said. If we just hand this to Paulina's lawyer, the hospital will bury him in motions and delays. They'll drag it out for years. Paulina doesn't have years. So what do we do? Tommy asked. Morris had been thinking about this question for days. We go nuclear. We don't give them time to prepare a defense or coordinate a response. We hit them from every direction at once. He pulled up a new document and started typing. Target 1, State Medical Board. Submit formal complaint against Dr. Sebastian Barnes. Include all original surgical notes and evidence of cover-up. Request emergency review and suspension of license pending investigation. Target 2, Media. Contact investigative reporters at TV stations and newspapers. Provide complete evidence package. Frame as, hospital destroys evidence to protect negligent surgeon. Target 3, State Attorney General. Submit evidence of fraud and destruction of medical records. Request criminal investigation. Highlight pattern of retaliation against healthcare workers who report misconduct. Target 4, Federal Medicare/Medicaid. Report billing fraud. Hospital billed for routine procedure while concealing complications that required extended surgery. Trigger audit of hospitals' billing practices. 4 simultaneous attacks, Morris said. They can't suppress all of them. One might get buried, but 4? The media alone will make this impossible to contain. Marcus was nodding slowly. When do we move? We need Paulina's permission first. This is her life, her story. She gets final say. Morris checked his watch. It's too late to call tonight. Tomorrow morning, we lay it all out for her and let her decide. What about Rebecca? Tommy asked. The hospital's going to know she leaked this. They'll destroy her. Which is why we make her part of the story from the beginning, Morris said. We don't treat her as an anonymous source. We put her front and center as a healthcare worker who tried to do the right thing and was retaliated against. We make her a hero, not a leak. Will that protect her? Marcus asked skeptically. No, Morris admitted. But it'll make it harder for the hospital to paint her as a disgruntled employee or a liar. And it might inspire other healthcare workers to come forward if they've witnessed similar things. He pulled up Rebecca's contact info. I'll call her tomorrow too. Make sure she knows what she's walking into. They worked until dawn, organizing files, drafting press releases, compiling evidence packages. By the time the sun came up, they had everything ready. Morris sent a text to Paulina, need to meet today. Important. Bring Emma if she wants to be part of this. The response came 10 minutes later. 2 p.m. at the farm? See you then, Morris replied. He closed his laptop and looked at his brothers. Marcus and Tommy looked as exhausted as he felt, but there was something else in their expressions too. Purpose. The kind that came from knowing you were about to do something that mattered. Jake would have loved this, Marcus said quietly. Morris smiled. Yeah, he would have. Jake had always believed that the world was divided into two types of people, those who looked away when they saw injustice, and those who did something about it. He'd spent his life trying to be the second type. And now, 5 years after his death, his brothers were honoring that legacy by standing up for the woman who'd saved his life. Some bonds outlast death. Some promises matter more than risk. And sometimes, Morris thought, justice doesn't come from courtrooms or institutions. Sometimes it comes from people who refuse to look away, even when looking away would be so much easier. Paulina sat at her kitchen table, 6 pages of legal documents spread in front of her, and tried to wrap her mind around what Morris was saying. If we do this, he said, there's no going back. The hospital will fight. They'll try to discredit Rebecca, discredit you, make this as ugly as possible. It could take months. It could get expensive even with Rebecca's evidence. And there's no guarantee we win. Emma was sitting beside Paulina, reading through the documents with an intensity that made her look older than 13. On the other side of the table, Rebecca Morrison sat quietly, hands folded, waiting. What happens to you? Paulina asked Rebecca. If we go public with this? Rebecca's smile was sad. I get fired. Probably lose my nursing license. The hospital will claim I violated patient confidentiality and breached my employment contract. They might press criminal charges, though I doubt those would stick. So you lose everything. I lose my job and my career. But I keep my integrity. Rebecca met Paulina's eyes. I stayed quiet once before when I should have spoken up. I watched that drunk surgeon operate on 3 more patients before he retired. One of them died on the table. I've had to live with that. I won't live with this too. Paulina looked at Emma. What do you think? I think they hurt you and they shouldn't get away with it, Emma said fiercely. I think if we don't fight, they'll do this to someone else. Some other grandmother. Some other family. Fighting is expensive. Even with evidence, we might lose. Not fighting is expensive too. Emma gestured at the stack of medical bills on the counter. We're already drowning, Grandma. What do we have to lose? Our privacy. Our peace. The chance to just move on. We can't move on, Emma said. You're in pain every day. The farm is failing. We're barely holding on. Moving on isn't an option. We're already falling apart. Morris pulled out his laptop. Before you decide, there's something you should see. We've been doing research on Dr. Barnes. He turned the screen toward Paulina. It showed a medical board website with a list of complaints. 3 other patients have filed complaints against Barnes in the past 7 years, Morris said. 2 for surgical complications, 1 for inappropriate conduct. None of them went anywhere because, surprise, in all 3 cases, the medical records were incomplete or contradictory. No definitive proof of wrongdoing. So he's done this before, Paulina said quietly. We can't prove it. But the pattern is there. And if we do this, if we go public with Rebecca's evidence and force a real investigation, those other cases might get reopened. Those other patients might get a chance at justice too. Paulina thought about the other people Dr. Barnes had operated on. The ones who'd complained and been dismissed. The ones who'd suffered and had no recourse because their records had conveniently disappeared too. She thought about the 6 grandchildren upstairs, about the farm that was slipping away, about the future that was narrowing with each passing day. And she thought about Jake, lying in a hospital bed 35 years ago, given up for dead, saved by herbs and stubbornness and a refusal to accept that some people didn't matter. What happens if we go public and lose? She asked Morris. Then you're no worse off than you are now. You'll still have the farm for as long as you can hold on to it. You'll still have the kids. You'll have tried. And if we win? If we win, the hospital pays for corrective surgery and enough damages to save your farm. Barnes loses his medical license. The hospital faces consequences for destroying evidence. And maybe Maybe other patients who've been wronged by this system realize they're not powerless. Paulina looked at Rebecca. You're sure about this? You're really willing to lose your career? I'm willing to be able to look at myself in the mirror again, Rebecca said. That's worth more than any job. Emma reached over and took Paulina's hand. Grandma, you taught me that sometimes you have to fight even when you're scared. You taught me that standing up for what's right matters more than being comfortable. You taught me that family protects family, even when it's hard. We're not related, Paulina said to Morris and Rebecca. No, Morris agreed. But we're family anyway. And family doesn't let this kind of thing slide. Paulina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settle over her. Every practical part of her brain screamed that this was risky, that she should just accept her fate and try to survive as long as she could. But Emma was right, they were already drowning. And Rebecca was right, some things mattered more than safety. She opened her eyes. Okay, she said. Let's do it. But I have conditions. Name them, Morris said. 1. Emma doesn't get dragged into media interviews or made into some kind of symbol. She's 13. She deserves to be a kid for as long as she can. Agreed. 2. If this starts affecting my other grandchildren, if they get bullied at school or harassed because of the publicity, we stop. Their well-being comes first. Agreed. 3. Rebecca gets legal protection. I don't care what it costs, she doesn't face this alone. Morris looked at Rebecca. We've already got a lawyer lined up for you. Pro bono. He specializes in whistleblower protection. Rebecca's eyes went wide. I can't afford. You're not paying. We are. Morris turned back to Paulina. Anything else? Paulina thought for a moment. Yeah. One more thing. When this is over, win or lose, I want to know that we did this the right way. No threats. No intimidation. No breaking the law. We fight with the truth and we fight clean. Agreed. Agreed, Morris said. Though I reserve the right to be intimidating just by existing. Despite everything, Paulina laughed. Deal. Emma squeezed her grandmother's hand. When do we start? Morris pulled out his phone. How about right now? He started typing. I'm sending the evidence package to the State Medical Board, 3 news stations, and the Attorney General's office. It'll hit their inboxes in the next 5 minutes. By tomorrow morning, this will be news. By tomorrow afternoon, the hospital will be in full damage control mode. And by the end of the week, Dr. Sebastian Barnes is going to wish he'd admitted his mistake 8 months ago instead of trying to bury it. Paulina watched him type, watched Rebecca sit up a little straighter, watched Emma's fierce pride at her grandmother's decision. She felt the pain in her abdomen, still there, still constant, still a reminder of what had been done to her. But she also felt something else. Something she hadn't felt in 8 months. The evidence packages went out at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. By 5 p.m., the first news station had called back, requesting an interview. By 7 p.m., the State Medical Board had opened an emergency investigation. By 9 p.m., Memorial Medical Center's legal team knew they had a problem they couldn't make disappear. And by midnight, Dr. Sebastian Barnes was sitting in his attorney's office, realizing that the mistake he'd made 8 months ago, and the cover-up he'd participated in, was about to cost him everything. The next 48 hours would determine whether an institution could suppress the truth, or whether a dairy farmer, a nurse, and a motorcycle club could force accountability. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't money or lawyers or institutional authority. Sometimes it's just the truth, told loudly enough that people can't pretend not to hear it. The first news story broke at 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. Channel 7's investigative reporter, Linda Martinez, had stayed up half the night reviewing the evidence package Morris sent. At 5:30 a.m., she'd called her editor at home. By 6 a.m., they were running a special segment on the morning news. Hospital accused of destroying evidence in malpractice cover-up, the headline read. Linda stood outside Memorial Medical Center, her cameraman filming as early morning staff arrived for their shifts. Her voice was professional but edged with controlled outrage. Channel 7 News has obtained exclusive documentation that Memorial Medical Center allegedly destroyed surgical records to cover up medical malpractice. The case involves Paulina Patterson, a 68-year-old dairy farmer who underwent routine gallbladder surgery 8 months ago. According to original surgical notes obtained by this station, Dr. Sebastian Barnes accidentally perforated Ms. Patterson's intestine during the procedure, a complication that was repaired but never disclosed to the patient. The screen showed excerpts from Rebecca's original notes, key phrases highlighted. Even more troubling, Linda continued, multiple sources confirm that the hospital's legal team ordered all backup files related to this surgery destroyed during a so-called system migration. When Ms. Patterson requested her medical records to seek a second opinion, she was told those records had been lost. Cut to footage of Paulina's farm, the modest house, the dairy barn, the land that had been in her family for generations. Ms. Patterson has been in constant pain since the surgery. She's raising 6 grandchildren alone and facing financial ruin due to mounting medical bills. She requested her surgical records. The hospital claimed they were lost. But they weren't lost. According to documentation we've obtained, they were deliberately destroyed. The camera cut back to Linda. We reached out to Memorial Medical Center for comment. They sent us this statement. Memorial Medical Center takes patient safety and medical record integrity seriously. We are reviewing these allegations and cannot comment on pending legal matters. Linda's expression made it clear what she thought of that response. But here's what we can confirm. Dr. Sebastian Barnes has had 3 previous complaints filed against him, all involving surgical complications, and in all 3 cases, medical records were incomplete. Rebecca Morrison, a registered nurse who assisted in Ms. Patterson's surgery, has provided sworn testimony that she was ordered to amend her surgical notes to remove documentation of Dr. Barnes's error. Ms. Morrison is risking her career to come forward with this information. The segment showed a photo of Rebecca, professional headshot, nurse's scrubs, looking directly at the camera with quiet determination. We also obtained this email from the hospital's legal department to Dr. Barnes. The email appeared on screen, key phrases highlighted in red. All documentation regarding the Patterson procedure has been reviewed and amended per hospital protocol. Backup files purged during scheduled system migration. Linda looked directly into the camera. That's not a mistake. That's not a lost file. That's institutional corruption. And the question everyone should be asking is, if Memorial Medical Center will destroy evidence to protect one surgeon, what else are they hiding? The segment ended with information about where viewers could file complaints with the medical board and how to contact the Attorney General's office. By 7 a.m., the story was trending on social media. By 8 a.m., 2 other news stations had picked it up. By 9 a.m., Memorial Medical Center's phone lines were overwhelmed with angry callers. And by 10 a.m., Dr. Sebastian Barnes was placed on immediate administrative suspension. Morris watched the coverage from the clubhouse. His brothers gathered around the television. "It's working," Marcus said. Morris nodded, but he knew this was just the beginning. The hospital's going to respond. They'll try to discredit Rebecca, maybe go after Paulina too. We need to be ready. His phone rang. "Paulina, have you seen the news?" she asked. She sounded shaken. "I'm watching it now. You okay?" "There are reporters in my driveway." Emma counted 6 news vans. "They're asking to interview me, asking about the grandkids, wanting to film the farm." "Don't talk to any of them yet. Linda Martinez is friendly. I vetted her before sending the package. But the others might twist your words or try to make this about something it's not. I'm sending Marcus and Tommy to your place. They'll keep the reporters at a respectful distance." "Morris, this is getting bigger than I expected." "I know. But that's good. The bigger it gets, the harder it is for the hospital to make it disappear. Just stay calm, don't give any interviews without us present, and remember, the truth is on your side." After they hung up, Morris called Rebecca. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I got a call from hospital administration at 6:30 this morning." Rebecca's voice was steady but tired. "I've been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into potential violations of patient privacy and employment agreements." My nursing supervisor told me to expect termination by end of week. Did you talk to the lawyer we set you up with?
Yes.
He says they can fire me, but the retaliation is so obvious that we'll have a strong wrongful termination case. He's also filing a whistleblower protection claim with the state.
Good.
What about reporters? 3 have called. I told them all the same thing you told me to say. I came forward because patients deserve the truth. I'm prepared to testify under oath about everything I witnessed. Morris smiled. Perfect. Keep that message consistent. You're a healthcare worker who tried to do the right thing. You're not attacking the hospital, you're defending a patient. That narrative is important. Morris. Rebecca's voice softened. Thank you. For believing me. For helping me do this. You're the one taking all the risk. We're just making noise. The noise matters. Without you, I'd have sent those files to a lawyer who would have negotiated some quiet settlement where the truth stayed buried. You made sure the truth got loud. After they disconnected, Morris pulled up the medical board's website. He'd submitted the formal complaint against Dr. Barnes at 3 a.m. Now, checking the status, he saw, emergency review initiated. That was fast. Usually medical board investigations took months. Emergency review meant they'd seen something serious enough to warrant immediate action. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Gerald Whitmore, Chief Legal Counsel at Memorial Medical Center. We need to talk. This situation can be resolved quietly if you're willing to be reasonable. Morris showed the text to Marcus. They're already trying to negotiate. What are you going to do? Morris typed a response. All communications go through Paulina Patterson's attorney. Have your people contact him. He waited 30 seconds, then added, and Mr. Whitmore? The time for quiet resolution was 8 months ago when you could have admitted the mistake and helped the patient. You chose cover-up instead. Now you get consequences. He sent the text and blocked the number. Think that was smart? Tommy asked. Probably not, Morris admitted. But it felt good. By noon, the story had gone regional. News stations in 3 neighboring states picked it up. By 2 p.m., it had gone national. CNN ran a segment about medical malpractice cover-ups, using Paulina's case as the lead example. And by 4 p.m., something unexpected happened. Morris's phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time he answered. This is Morris. Mr. Morris, my name is Jennifer Chin. I'm an attorney with Public Justice, a national consumer advocacy organization. We've been following the Patterson case today. I'd like to discuss representing Ms. Patterson pro bono. Morris went still. Pro bono? As in no cost to her? Correct. Our organization takes on cases that have broader implications for patient rights and medical accountability. This case, the systematic destruction of evidence, the pattern of complaints against Dr. Barnes, the retaliation against the nurse who spoke up, this is exactly the kind of institutional corruption we exist to fight. If Ms. Patterson is interested, we'd like to file a civil suit against Memorial Medical Center and Dr. Barnes on her behalf. What kind of damages are we talking about? Medical malpractice, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, possibly RICO charges if we can prove this is part of a larger pattern of evidence destruction. We'd be seeking full compensation for corrective surgery, lost wages, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. Conservatively, we're talking 7 figures. Morris had to sit down. 7 figures? If we can prove what we think we can prove, yes. But more importantly, we'd be seeking policy changes. We want Memorial Medical Center to implement independent oversight of medical records, mandatory reporting of surgical complications, and protection for healthcare workers who report misconduct. We want to make sure this never happens to another patient. I need to talk to Paulina, Morris said. Of course. Have her call me at this number. But Mr. Morris? Tell her she's not alone in this. Tell her that when institutions abuse their power this flagrantly, there are people who will fight back. After the call ended, Morris sat in silence for a long moment. 7 figures. Policy changes. National attention. What had started as keeping a promise to a dying brother was becoming something much larger. He called Paulina. We need to talk. Something just happened that changes everything. Within 24 hours of the story breaking, Memorial Medical Center was facing Emergency Medical Board investigation of Dr. Barnes, State Attorney General inquiry into evidence destruction, federal Medicare audit of billing practices, 3 additional former patients coming forward with similar stories, 2 hospital board members calling for the CEO's resignation, staff walkout by nurses demanding whistleblower protections. The institution that thought it could bury one elderly woman's complaint was learning a hard lesson. When the truth gets loud enough, power can't suppress it. But the hospital wasn't done fighting. They had resources. They had lawyers. And they were about to show exactly how ugly this battle could get. The hospital's counterattack came on Thursday morning. A press conference. Memorial Medical Center's CEO, board chairman, and a team of attorneys stood before cameras, projecting calm authority. Memorial Medical Center has served this community for 47 years, the CEO began. In that time, we've treated hundreds of thousands of patients with the highest standards of care. We take any allegation of misconduct seriously, which is why we've launched an internal investigation into the claims made by Ms. Morrison and Ms. Patterson. He paused, letting that sink in. However, we must also address some troubling facts that have come to light. Ms. Morrison was previously reprimanded for workplace misconduct and was under performance review at the time she made these allegations. We have reason to believe her claims are motivated by personal grievance rather than genuine concern for patient safety. The camera flashed to Rebecca's personnel file, displayed on a screen behind the CEO. Insubordinate behavior. Failure to follow protocol. Documented conflicts with medical staff. Morris, watching from Paulina's farmhouse, felt his jaw clench. Furthermore, the CEO continued, we've discovered that Ms. Morrison violated patient privacy laws by removing confidential medical records from hospital premises. She shared these records with unauthorized parties, which is a criminal offense under state and federal law. We are cooperating with law enforcement regarding potential charges. The reporters started shouting questions, but the CEO raised his hand. As for Ms. Patterson's claims, we sympathize with her medical challenges. However, our records show that her surgical procedure was completed without incident. Any complications she experienced afterward are unfortunate but not the result of medical error. We offered Ms. Patterson additional consultations and support, which she declined. Instead, she chose to make unsubstantiated allegations with the assistance of individuals who have their own legal troubles. The screen behind him changed to show mugshots. Morris recognized several of them. His brothers, arrested over the years for various offenses. Most of the charges had been dropped or dismissed, but the mugshots remained. Ms. Patterson has aligned herself with members of a known criminal organization, the CEO said. We believe she's being manipulated by individuals who see an opportunity for financial gain through frivolous litigation. Memorial Medical Center will vigorously defend itself against these baseless accusations. The press conference ended with the CEO promising full transparency while simultaneously announcing that they couldn't comment further on ongoing legal matters. Paulina, sitting beside Morris on her couch, looked shaken. They're making me look like a liar. They're making Rebecca look like a criminal. And they're making you look like... We are criminals, Morris said bluntly. I mean, we're not. But we have records. Most of us have done time for one thing or another. The CEO's not wrong about that. So they're going to use that against us? They're going to try. Morris pulled out his phone. But here's what they don't understand. They just made a mistake. How? They attacked Rebecca's character. They called her a liar motivated by personal grievance. And in doing that, he pulled up a news article from 3 years ago. They just proved her retaliation claim. The article was about the drunk surgeon Rebecca had reported. It included quotes from hospital administration defending the doctor and dismissing the complaint as unsubstantiated allegations from a disgruntled employee. Same language, Paulina said, reading. Same strategy. Exactly. They have a pattern of attacking people who report misconduct. Which means Rebecca's lawyer can now argue that the hospital retaliates against whistleblowers as standard practice. They just gave us evidence for a whole second lawsuit. His phone rang. Jennifer Chen, the public justice attorney. "Did you see the press conference?" she asked. "Every word." "But, because I'm filing our civil suit this afternoon, and I'm adding a wrongful termination and retaliation claim for Ms. Morrison. The hospital just publicly admitted they're going after her for coming forward. That's textbook retaliation." "What about the criminal charges they threatened?" "Empty threat. Yes, she technically removed confidential records, but she's protected under whistleblower statutes. She was reporting evidence of fraud and malpractice. No prosecutor is going to charge her, and if they try, we'll take it to the Supreme Court if we have to." Jennifer paused. "How's Miss Patterson holding up?" Morris looked at Paulina. "She's tougher than they think." "But, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. The hospital is going to dig up everything they can find. They'll try to discredit her, question her parenting, maybe even imply she's neglecting those grandkids. We need to be ready." After the call, Emma came downstairs. She'd been watching the press conference on her phone. "They called you criminals," she said to Morris. "They showed your mugshots on TV. Yeah. Are you going to stop helping us? Now that they're attacking you too?" Morris looked at this 13-year-old girl who'd ridden her bicycle across town to ask strangers for help, who'd pushed her grandmother to fight when giving up would have been easier, who understood instinctively that sometimes the people society labels as dangerous are the ones who show up when everyone else looks away. "Emma," he said quietly, "your grandmother saved my brother's life when every medical professional had given up on him. She did it with herbs and hope and a refusal to accept that some people don't matter. You think I'm going to walk away now because a hospital CO flashed some old mugshots? You think we're scared of lawyers?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared." "I know. And that's okay. Being scared means you understand what's at stake." Morris leaned forward. "But here's what you need to understand. We've been judged and dismissed and written off our entire lives. We're used to people thinking the worst of us. So when a hospital tries to discredit us by pointing out that we have criminal records, all they're doing is confirming what everyone already assumed. They're not hurting us, they're showing their desperation." "How do we fight back?" Paulina asked. "We do what we've been doing. We tell the truth. We let Rebecca's evidence speak for itself. And we remind everyone that this isn't about us, it's about whether a hospital can destroy evidence and get away with it." Marcus knocked on the door and came in without waiting for a response. "Boss, you need to see this." He held up his phone. It showed a social media post from Dr. Karen Chin, the anesthesiologist who'd been in the OR during Paulina's surgery. The post was simple: "I was in the OR during the Patterson procedure. I saw what happened. The nurse's documentation was accurate. I'm prepared to testify." Comments were already flooding in. Other hospital staff adding their voices. Stories about being pressured to amend records, being retaliated against for reporting problems, being told to stay quiet, for the good of the institution. "The CEO's press conference backfired," Marcus said. "He attacked Rebecca so aggressively that other healthcare workers are coming out of the woodwork supporting her. They're organizing a protest outside the hospital tomorrow, demanding whistleblower protections and independent oversight of medical records." Morris felt something shift in his chest. This was bigger than Paulina now. This was bigger than one botched surgery or one covered-up mistake. This was about every patient who'd been harmed and told it was their fault. Every healthcare worker who'd been silenced for speaking up. Every family that had been crushed by medical bills while institutions protected their bottom line. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "Now." Morris stood up. "Now we finish what we started. The hospital wanted to make this public? Fine. Let's make it as public as possible. Let's make sure everyone knows what happened here. And let's make sure it never happens again." He pulled out his phone and started making calls. By Friday afternoon, 3 more news vans were parked outside Memorial Medical Center. The nurses' protest had grown from a dozen people to over 100, with healthcare workers from other hospitals joining in solidarity. The state attorney general had announced a formal investigation, and the medical board had scheduled an emergency hearing on Dr. Barnes's license. The hospital tried to suppress it. Their legal team filed motions to seal evidence, to dismiss claims, to delay proceedings. But the truth was already out there, spreading through social media and news coverage faster than any legal team could contain it. And Paulina Patterson, sitting in her farmhouse surrounded by 6 grandchildren and a motorcycle club that refused to abandon her, realized something. She wasn't powerless after all. She just needed people to believe her. People to amplify her voice. People to stand beside her and say, "This matters. She matters." Sometimes that's all justice requires, refusing to let the powerful make you invisible. 3 weeks after the story broke, Gerald Whitmore sat across from Jennifer Chen in a conference room that felt too small for the weight of what was being negotiated. "Let me be clear about where we stand," Jennifer said, her voice professionally cold. "You've lost the public opinion battle. You've lost the medical board investigation. Dr. Barnes's license was suspended yesterday pending further review. You're under federal investigation for Medicare fraud. Your CEO is facing a vote of no confidence from the board. And you have 36 other former patients who've retained counsel based on similar patterns of evidence destruction." Whitmore's jaw was tight. "What's your point?" "My point is that if this goes to trial, you lose. Publicly. Expensively. Catastrophically. And it sets precedent that opens you up to hundreds of other claims." Jennifer slid a document across the table. "Or you settle. Generously. And you implement the policy changes we're demanding." Whitmore picked up the document. His face went pale as he read the numbers. $2.1 million? That's absurd. That's conservative. We could argue for twice that and probably get it. $800,000 for corrective surgery and future medical care. $500,000 for pain and suffering. $500,000 for loss of income and farm rehabilitation. $300,000 in punitive damages. Jennifer leaned forward. "And before you argue that it's excessive, remember that your institution deliberately destroyed evidence of malpractice and coordinated a cover-up involving at least 8 employees. A jury would give us whatever we asked for. We'd never agree to this. Then we'll see you in court. With cameras. With testimony from Dr. Chen and 3 other surgical staff members who've now come forward. With Rebecca Morrison's original notes and your own emails discussing the destruction of backup files. With every news outlet in the country watching you try to explain why you think protecting one surgeon's reputation was worth destroying a grandmother's life." Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. "What policy changes?" Jennifer slid across another document. "Independent Oversight Board for Medical Records, composed of patient advocates and healthcare workers not employed by the hospital. Mandatory incident reporting for all surgical complications, with copies provided to patients within 72 hours. Whistleblower protection policy that specifically prohibits retaliation against healthcare workers who report concerns. Annual third-party audits of medical records integrity. And establishment of a patient advocacy office with authority to investigate complaints. That's restructuring our entire medical records department. This. Because your current system enabled evidence destruction. You want to avoid future liability? You implement systems that make evidence destruction impossible. And if we agree to the settlement and the policy changes? Then Ms. Patterson signs a non-disclosure agreement about the settlement amount only, not about what happened to her. She's free to discuss her experience, just not the financial terms. You issue a public statement acknowledging that errors were made in her care and that you've implemented policy changes to prevent similar incidents. You settle Ms. Morrison's wrongful termination suit separately and reinstate her nursing license with a clean record. And you agree not to contest the medical board's findings regarding Dr. Barnes. So Barnes loses his license permanently. He's not your problem anymore. He made a mistake, then participated in covering it up. That's on him." Whitmore read through the settlement terms again. Jennifer could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Fight and lose everything, or settle and take the hit now while salvaging what they could. "I need to discuss this with the board," he finally said. "You have 48 hours. After that, we file and this becomes a jury's decision." Jennifer stood up. "Oh, and Mr. Whitmore? The next time a patient asks for medical records and you can't provide them, try telling the truth instead of claiming they were lost. Might save you a few $1,000,000. 2 days later, Paulina sat in Jennifer Chen's office, staring at a settlement agreement. $2.1 million. It was more money than she'd made in her entire life. More money than she'd imagined was possible when Emma first rode her bicycle to the clubhouse 3 weeks ago. "Is this real?" she asked. "It's real," Jennifer confirmed. They caved. They knew they couldn't win. Morris was there too, along with Rebecca. Emma had wanted to come, but Paulina had insisted she stay with her siblings. This wasn't something a 13-year-old needed to be part of. "What about the policy changes?" Paulina asked. Jennifer smiled. "All of them. Independent Oversight Board, mandatory incident reporting, whistleblower protections, everything we asked for. Memorial Medical Center is completely restructuring their medical records department. And they're funding a patient advocacy office with real authority to investigate complaints. So this won't happen to anyone else? It'll be a lot harder. And other hospitals are watching. When word gets out that we won these concessions, patient advocacy groups across the country are going to push for similar policies at their institutions. You didn't just get justice for yourself, Paulina. You might have changed how hospitals handle medical errors everywhere." Rebecca was crying quietly. "What about me? Separate settlement, $400,000 for wrongful termination and retaliation. Hospital has agreed to reinstate your nursing license with a clean record and issue a public statement acknowledging that you acted appropriately in reporting concerns about patient safety. They're also implementing the whistleblower protection policy I mentioned, partly because of your case. Can I go back to nursing? You can go anywhere you want. With a clean record and a public vindication, you'll have hospitals competing to hire you." Jennifer paused. "Though I'd recommend somewhere other than Memorial." They all laughed, the tension breaking for just a moment. "There's one condition," Jennifer said, looking at Paulina. "The NDA about the settlement amount. You can talk about what happened to you, you can tell your story, advocate for patient rights, speak at conferences, whatever you want. But you can't publicly disclose the dollar amount. That's standard in settlements like this." "Why?" "Because the hospital doesn't want other patients to know how much they're willing to pay. If word gets out that they settled for $2.1 million, every other person who's been harmed will know what they can demand." Jennifer smiled. "But between us? I hope word leaks anyway. Institutions like this need to know that evidence destruction has consequences." Paulina looked at Morris. "What do you think?" "I think Jake would be proud," Morris said quietly. "I think you fought when fighting seemed impossible and you won. I think you're about to save your farm, get the medical care you need, and set your grandkids up for a future that looked pretty bleak 3 weeks ago. And I think you did it without compromising who you are. Take the settlement, Paulina. You earned it." She picked up the pen. Her hand shook slightly as she signed her name. It was done. 6 months later, Paulina stood in a different hospital's pre-op room, preparing for corrective surgery. This time, she had a different surgeon. A different hospital. A team of doctors who'd reviewed every detail of her case and developed a comprehensive plan for repairing the damage Dr. Barnes had caused. And this time, she wasn't alone. Emma sat beside her, holding her hand. Morris was in the waiting room with Marcus and Tommy. Rebecca had taken a personal day from her new job, at a hospital 3 counties over that had specifically recruited her after the settlement made headlines, to be there for support. "You nervous?" Emma asked. "Terrified," Paulina admitted. "Last time I had surgery, it destroyed my life. Hard not to be scared. Last time, you had a doctor who made mistakes and a hospital that covered them up. This time, you have a surgeon who reviewed your case for 3 months before agreeing to operate. This time, you have people watching out for you." Paulina squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time I rode my bike across town to ask bikers for help." Emma smiled. "Turns out facing scary things makes you grow up fast." "Too fast," Paulina said softly. "Maybe. But also maybe I needed to learn that lesson. That when institutions fail you, when people in power let you down, you don't have to accept it. You can fight back. You taught me that, Grandma." The surgeon came in, Dr. Patricia Hayes, 50-something, with kind eyes and a reputation for taking on complicated cases that other doctors refused. "Ready?" she asked Paulina. "As I'll ever be. I've reviewed your scans a dozen times. I know exactly what needs to be fixed. The scarring is extensive, but it's all reparable. You're going to have a long recovery. We're talking 3 to 4 months before you're back to full strength. But when we're done, you'll be pain-free for the first time in 14 months. Pain-free, Paulina repeated. She'd almost forgotten what that felt like. Pain-free, Dr. Hayes confirmed. And before I take you back, I want you to know something. What you did, standing up to Memorial Medical Center, forcing them to change their policies, that mattered. I've had colleagues reach out from hospitals across the country saying they're implementing similar oversight systems because of your case. You changed how we think about patient advocacy and medical accountability. I just wanted the truth, Paulina said. The truth was enough. Dr. Hayes smiled. Okay, let's get you fixed up. Emma will come get you as soon as she's in recovery. Probably about 6 hours. They wheeled Paulina toward the operating room. She looked back once, saw Emma waving, saw Morris standing in the doorway giving her a thumbs up. She thought about Jake, 35 years ago, lying in a hospital bed while doctors gave up on him. She thought about the herbs and hope that had saved him. She thought about how far they'd all come from that moment. Some bonds outlast everything. Some debts are repaid across decades. Some promises matter more than risk. And sometimes, justice actually wins. The surgery took 8 hours. Dr. Hayes repaired intestinal damage, removed scarring, and reconstructed areas that had been permanently compromised by the original botched procedure. When Paulina woke up in recovery, the first thing she noticed was the absence of pain. Not complete absence. There was post-surgical discomfort, soreness from the procedure itself. But the deep, constant, radiating agony that had defined her life for 14 months was gone. Emma was there, reading a book in the chair beside her bed. When she saw Paulina's eyes open, she set the book aside and leaned close. "How do you feel?" "Different," Paulina whispered. Her throat was dry from anesthesia. "The pain, it's not there." Emma started crying. Dr. Hayes said the surgery went perfectly. She said you're going to be okay. Paulina reached for her granddaughter's hand. "We're going to be okay. All of us." And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. 1 year after the settlement, Paulina's farm looked different. The dairy barn had been repaired and expanded. New equipment hummed efficiently, managed by 2 full-time employees Paulina had hired with settlement money. The farmhouse had a new roof, new windows, energy-efficient heating that would save money through the harsh winters. But the biggest change was Paulina herself. She moved without pain now. She could lift her youngest grandson, now 6, without wincing. She could work a full day without needing to lie down for hours afterward. She could play with the kids, help with homework, plan for futures that had seemed impossible a year ago. College funds had been established for all 6 grandchildren. The farm was secured, debts paid off, operating at a profit for the first time in years. Emma was 14 now, growing into a fierce advocate for patient rights. She'd started volunteering with a healthcare advocacy group, helping other families navigate medical billing disputes. And every week, Paulina still delivered milk to the Hells Angels clubhouse. Some traditions mattered. Today was Sunday, and she pulled up to the clubhouse with her weekly delivery. Morris came out to help unload. "You know you don't have to do this anymore," he said, carrying crates of milk inside. "We could just buy from the grocery store." "And pay half the price?" "Why would I let you do that?" "Because you're not struggling anymore. You don't need this income." "It's not about the income." Paulina handed him the last crate. "It's about showing up. It's about honoring relationships that matter." 36 years, Morris. That's longer than most marriages. "You think I'm going to stop now?" He smiled. Jake would have liked seeing how this turned out. He would have loved it. He always believed in fighting back against institutions that abused their power. He always said people matter more than policy. They went inside. The clubhouse was full, members and their families gathering for a Sunday barbecue. Kids running around, music playing, the smell of grilling meat mixing with motorcycle exhaust and summer air. Emma was there too, along with her siblings. They'd become honorary members of this extended family, kids who grew up knowing that family isn't always about blood, that community is built through showing up and standing together. Rebecca arrived later, bringing her teenagers. She was thriving in her new job, had become a vocal advocate for healthcare workers' rights, and had been interviewed by nursing journals about her whistleblower experience. "How's the advocacy work going?" Paulina asked her. "Exhausting and amazing," Rebecca said. "I've been contacted by 14 other nurses in the past month alone, all of them witnessing misconduct, all of them afraid to report it. I've been helping them document everything and connecting them with lawyers. We're building a network." Of whistleblowers? Of people who give a damn about patients more than they give a damn about protecting institutions. Rebecca looked around the clubhouse, at the leather-clad bikers and their families, at the kids playing, at the community that had formed around shared values of loyalty and justice. "You know what's funny? A year ago, I thought motorcycle clubs were dangerous. I thought hospitals were safe. Turns out I had it exactly backward." Morris overheard and laughed. "We're only dangerous to people who deserve it." "Speaking of which," Rebecca said, "did you hear about Dr. Barnes?" Paulina hadn't been following the news about her former surgeon. The settlement required her to let legal proceedings continue without her involvement. "The medical board revoked his license permanently last week," Rebecca continued. "He tried to appeal, but 3 more of his former patients came forward with evidence of complications he'd concealed. The board ruled that he demonstrated a pattern of negligence and dishonesty incompatible with medical practice. So he'll never operate again," Paulina said. "Never." Ann Memorial Medical Center settled with 2 of those other patients for undisclosed amounts. The hospital's new oversight board has flagged 17 cases where records were suspiciously incomplete. They're reopening all of them. 17 people, Emma said quietly. 17 other patients who might have been hurt and had their records destroyed. "Which means 17 people who might now get justice because you fought back," Rebecca said to Paulina. "That's your legacy. Not just saving your farm or getting corrective surgery. You changed a system that was hurting people." Paulina didn't quite know what to do with that. She'd never set out to be an advocate or a whistleblower or a catalyst for change. She'd just been a grandmother in pain, trying to survive, trying to protect the kids who depended on her. But maybe that was enough. Maybe you didn't need to be powerful or rich or connected to make a difference. Maybe you just needed to be stubborn enough to demand the truth and fortunate enough to find people willing to stand beside you. As the sun set over the clubhouse, as kids played and adults talked and motorcycles gleamed in the fading light, Paulina thought about the journey that had brought her here. A botched surgery. Destroyed evidence. A 13-year-old's desperate bicycle ride. A nurse's conscience. A motorcycle club's loyalty. A settlement that changed everything. And through it all, the unwavering truth that some bonds transcend circumstance, some communities are stronger than institutions, and some battles are worth fighting even when victory seems impossible. Emma appeared beside her, holding a glass of lemonade. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" "I'm thinking about how lucky we are," Paulina said. "Lucky?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "You were almost killed by medical malpractice and had to fight a hospital for a year to get justice. That doesn't sound lucky. But we won. We survived. We found people who believed us and helped us fight back. We turned something terrible into something that might help other people." Paulina put her arm around her granddaughter. "A year ago, I was lying on a barn floor in pain, thinking everything was over. Now I'm standing here, pain-free, with you and your siblings safe and secure and a future that looks pretty good. That's not luck. That's grace." Morris appeared, carrying a cup of coffee. "Hate to interrupt the hallmark moment, but we're about to cut the cake." Emma promised she'd help serve. Emma hugged her grandmother and ran off to help with dessert. Morris stood beside Paulina, both of them watching the gathering. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Better than okay. I'm good, Morris. Really good. Jake would have been happy about that." "I know. I think about him sometimes. About that night in the hospital when I gave him herbs and hope and a refusal to accept what the doctor said. I never expected it to matter this much, that one night 36 years ago. Some debts compound over time, Morris said. He lived because you refused to give up on him. You lived because we refused to give up on you. That's how it works. That's how we survive. Paulina looked around at the people gathered in the clubhouse. Bikers and nurses and grandchildren and families. A community built not on geography or genetics but on shared values of loyalty, justice, and showing up when it mattered most. Thank you, she said to Morris. For everything. For believing me. For fighting for me. For keeping your promise to Jake. You don't owe me thanks. Your family. That's what family does. Then thank you for being my family. Morris smiled, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set on a community that had faced down an institution and won. 3 years after the settlement, Emma graduated high school. She'd been accepted to nursing school on a full scholarship, inspired by Rebecca's example and determined to become the kind of healthcare worker who always put patients first. Paulina sat in the audience at graduation, surrounded by her other grandchildren, now ages 9 to 16, watching her oldest grandchild walk across that stage and thinking about how close they'd come to losing everything. The farm was thriving. The kids were secure. Paulina's health was fully restored. She could work a full day, play with grandchildren, plan for decades ahead instead of counting down days. Ann Memorial Medical Center had become a model for patient advocacy and medical transparency, their oversight systems now studied by hospitals across the country as examples of how to prevent evidence destruction and protect whistleblowers. Dr. Barnes never practiced medicine again. Rebecca had been promoted to nursing supervisor at her hospital, where she'd implemented mandatory ethics training for all staff. And Morris and his brothers continued their weekly milk deliveries and their quiet work of standing up for people whom institutions had failed. Some stories don't have tidy endings. Some battles continue long after the courtroom victories. But this story, Paulina's story, proved something important. When people stand together, when communities refuse to let their members suffer in silence, when individuals risk everything to tell the truth, justice is possible. It's not easy. It's not guaranteed. It costs something to fight back against institutions that have power and resources and every incentive to suppress the truth. But it's possible. And sometimes that possibility is enough. If you've stayed with this story for the past 48 minutes, thank you. Thank you for believing that patient rights matter. Thank you for understanding that healthcare workers who speak up deserve protection, not punishment. Thank you for recognizing that communities, even ones that look different from what society expects, can be powerful forces for justice. This story was about one grandmother and 6 grandchildren. It was about a nurse who risked her career. It was about a motorcycle club that honored a 36-year-old debt. But it was also about something bigger, the truth that institutions don't change unless people force them to change. Memorial Medical Center destroyed evidence because they thought one elderly dairy farmer didn't have the resources or the support to fight back. They were wrong. And their mistake led to policy changes that might protect countless other patients.
If this story resonated with you, I have 3 requests. First, hit that like button. It tells me you believe these kinds of stories matters, that accountability and justice in standing up for the vulnerable are worth 48 minutes of your time. Second, share this video. Share it with someone who works in healthcare and might be facing the same choice Rebecca faced. Stay silent or speak up. Share it with someone who's been harmed by medical error and thinks they are powerless. Share it with someone who needs to know that fighting back is possible. Third, subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep telling stories about people who refuse to accept injustice, who stand up when everyone tells them to sit down, who fight back when fighting seems impossible. Stories about courage, community, and the truth that none of us are as powerless as institutions want us to believe. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for believing that sometimes the most unlikely people, dairy farmers and bikers and nurses who risk everything, can change the world. Until next time, remember, some debts are repaid across decades. Some bonds are stronger than blood, and some battles are worth fighting, even when victory seems impossible.